I'm Robert Polito, author of Savage Art, a biography of Jim Thompson. The Grifters is a film based upon a Jim Thompson novel.
I had read a lot of Thompson. I was aware of him, and I was aware of him as, I think, the most nihilistic writer ever produced in America.
Jim Thompson was probably the darkest and boldest of all the American crime writers that are coming to be known as American noir. The first generation of American crime writers, the generation of Hammett and Chandler, I think deeply influenced the American noir films. The second generation, the generation of David Goodis and Jim Thompson, say, were as influenced by the movies as they were by the books that came before them.
When I was working with Stephen, he was reading everything he could find about Jim Thompson. One of the things he read, in fact, I think he phoned me from London, excited that he'd found this, was that somebody he'd read said that Jim Thompson had given Greek tragedy to the underclass. From then on, every once in a while, as we were going along through the thing, he'd say, "Now, are we sure we have the proper Sophoclean element here?" And so we were kidding, but we were trying to remind ourselves of what is it that we are doing.
The Grifters is a novel about sexual corruption, and at its core, it's about a triangle. And to represent that triangle with a tripartite screen, I think is just a dazzling bit of invention. Thompson himself was, I think, a master of experimental fiction. And I think you would have loved the kind of experimentation that goes on at the beginning of this film. Thompson was born in Anadarko, in what is now Oklahoma, in 1906. His father was a peace officer, and within a year of Thompson's birth, his father was indicted for embezzling funds from the county coffers. This set up a strange kind of wandering and lonely childhood for Jim Thompson. By the time he reached high school, the burden of supporting the family largely fell to Jim. His first job, and I think it was one of the decisive moments in his life, was as a bellboy in the Hotel Texas. Being a bellboy in the Hotel Texas meant that he procured women for people who wanted them, men for people who wanted them, drugs and bootleg alcohol for people who wanted that. It brought him in close and intimate contact with the Fort Worth underworld, and it was there that he learned the tricks that Roy Dillon employs, like the 20s that gets him in so much trouble in the bar.
His characters tend to be desperate because they're in the wrong place or they want the wrong things, and things just aren't working out for them. And in a way, that's, I don't want to push it, but in a way that's Thompson's story. He's in the wrong place. He's a very talented guy in the southwestern desert. So there's no opportunity for him to get into a place where his potential would be given respect.
Yeah, the Grifters is a surprisingly personal book and film. For instance, the name Dillon is a name that he used over and over again, particularly for characters that he had a lot of sympathy for. Thompson's Communist Party alias, everybody had who was a member of the party had an alias, was Robert Dillon. The summer before he wrote The Grifters, Thompson was hospitalized and nearly died from bleeding ulcers. I think he gave that hospitalization and those stomach problems to Roy Dillon after he's hit by the bartender. And I think that the filmmakers added a fascinating autobiographical wrinkle that isn't in the novel by situating the scene where Roy learns the grift in Anadarko, Thompson's hometown in Oklahoma.
One of his very early novels is a novel about a sort of a troubled marriage. The people, day by day by day, behave in just odd ways, and they're all right in the morning, and then they begin to bicker and carry on in the afternoon, and they get into terrible fights at night. And you read it and say, what am I reading? And what you're reading is a novel in which he airbrushed the alcohol out. Drinking was a problem for Thompson all through his life, and it made the characters what they were more than he would acknowledge. When Roy keeps saying that, oh, he's going to leave the grift, he's not going to do this anymore, he's only doing it in order to get enough money to not do it. That's very like drinking.
It's nothing but small-time stuff. I can walk away from it any time I want.
Sure.
I think Thompson was always aware that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, that he was on a rough, stubbly field, really, that it was going to be very hard for him to bloom on. And the bloom he produced, was a rather distorted one.
Shortly before he died, at a moment in 1977 when all of his books were out of print, Jim Thompson told his wife to hang on to all of his papers and copyrights because, just you watch, he said, in another 10 years, I'll be a household name, basically. While I think it took a few years longer than that, maybe 13 years to the time of the grifters, Thompson's deathbed prediction has largely come true. I think he's gradually being recognized as the most substantial and significant of the second generation of American crime writers, the generation that follows Hammett, Chandler, and Kane. There are various reasons for this, I think. I think one is just simply the strength of the books. I mean, the mixture of extreme violence and literary experimentation, I think, is almost unmatched in American literature except for writers like William Burroughs. But I think there was also a kind of political subtext to the revival as well. Thompson produced his greatest works in the early 1950s during the Eisenhower administration, and it's always struck me that it was no accident that the book started to be revived during a period that curiously resembles them, the Reagan-Bush years.
Actually, the whole Thompson approach in every way, in the story, in character, and everything, is in the title of another of his books, not one of his best ones, but This World and Then the Fireworks, which is saying everybody's going to hell. By the end of the movie, there's a shot in the elevator of Angelica going down in the elevator, which Stephen says, this is the descent into hell. And so he did the visual version of what every one of his books did.